Welcome into the newest episode of This Week in College Hockey, our first episode of the new year. We took a little break for the holidays. We all were busy with various stuff, so we got a bunch of things to talk about because we haven't recorded since I want to say the first week of December. So today, looking a little bit different. I'm Sydney Wolf, joined by Jess Myers and then Ryan Maney, but Tony is busy today. He's been doing a bunch of stuff with the World Roseau games and then driving all over the place. I guess I saw him and Peter's videos in the car yesterday. So they're busy, but I know Jess is wearing the World hat to
Well,
represent.
everybody else had a hat on, so I had to celebrate the Max rivalry yesterday. For my money, the greatest rivalry in high school hockey in Minnesota. I know my friend Ryan Halverson will tell me White Bear Hill Murray is a more intense rivalry, and maybe it is, but it's the one I grew up with, Warroad Roseau, and congrats to my old school, the Warriors, for winning the latest installment. As Ryan pointed out, Roseau still with like a 34 game lead in the all-time rivalry. They were very dominant in the 60s and 70s and had those great teams that won some state championships and the Broughton brothers and all that. So two great schools with great hockey tradition, always a fun rivalry, but congrats to Warroad for winning round one last night.
So I know we all had plenty of busy, chaotic schedules and everything over the past month since we haven't recorded in literally, I think, a month. I think maybe our last show was like December 7th or something like that, around that time. But Jess and Ryan, did you have any highlights from Christmas slash winter break? Did you watch any hockey besides the hockey you had to work for? Jess, did you have any good highlight moments from the last month or so?
I did get to see a little bit of World Juniors. It's only the second time I've ever been to a World Juniors. I went to a couple games when it was in Grand Forks 21 years ago or whatever it happened to be. Saw the U.S. play Germany, saw, Germany, Switzerland as it happened to be. Talked to some of those guys, Will Zellers and Brody Zemer and some of the kind of the local connections here. Let me just start off by saying this. The big story everybody wants to talk about is the crowds. The average attendance, I think I saw, was 6,300 for all of the games, which was about 500 lower on average than it was a year ago. It's significantly lower than it has been when it's been in Canada. Canada, I think, gets an asterisk. They invented hockey. It's a much bigger deal there. Overall, I think the Twin Cities did a fantastic job, and I hope it comes back here. Not it won't happen soon, but in the next 10, 15 years when they're looking at another American site to host, I want to give a stick salute to the folks who organized. They put in tons and tons of work to make this a good event. If the worst thing you can say is they didn't sell enough tickets, I think that's a pretty good event because there was lots to do away from the rink. Everybody I talked to involved with it said it was a good event for the Twin Cities. I talked to Tom Reed. He was very happy with the way things went down on West 7th Street as far as business from fans from the USA and from other places. So overall, I thought it was very good.
For sure. Yeah. And Ryan, how about you? Did you watch any crazy games or do any wild stuff here in December, early January?
No, I did nothing too wild other than enjoying the Minnesota Wild per se, and Quinn Hughes. Been very fun to watch them. I mean, they've been on this journey, we'll call it, as a road trip. I know Jess caught a little bit of it there. I believe they've got what stop is it tomorrow, Jess, on the trip?
Stop number seven on the 7 game trip. They finally get to play it out and come home. And I went to Los Angeles for the 3 games in Southern California. I saw him play Anaheim and then saw him play the Kings twice. 1-1-1 in the 3 games I attended. They got a win, they got a shootout loss, and they got a straight up loss, which is their first one since before Christmas. I'll admit it, talking to those guys after the Monday night game in Los Angeles, getting a little road weary. 2 weeks on the
Oh
road
yeah.
gets to be a lot. And keep in mind, the Wild, folks who organize things for the team and set up meals and hotels and all that, they are absolutely first class. I mean, they stay in 5-star hotels. They were at this place in Malibu overlooking the beach. I mean, they get the best of the best, so they get treated right. It's not like you're holed up in a Fairfield Inn, wondering what's on HBO.
Right.
There's lots to do and lots to see, so they get treated well. But 2 weeks on the road is a lot of time on the road, and that's gotten to be a lot for these guys. Nobody's making excuses, but you can tell they're really looking forward to getting home.
They are. How was the weather out there while you were out there?
Rainy. It rained most of the time I was
Oh,
there.
that's right. Was
We
it
got
the
like
Rose Bowl that was out there?
one nice day in Southern California. What's that?
What was it? The Rose Bowl I saw that
I'm
had the
sorry.
tarp
What
over
was
the
your
field?
question?
Was it?
There was yeah, the Rose Bowl was there. In fact, when I got to my hotel, there were tons of Indiana fans and a lot of real sad Alabama fans looking to head home. So yeah, yeah, this is the rainy season in Southern California, but we did get the sun came out one day, so that was good.
Fair enough.
Awesome.
Fair enough. I will say also Sydney. I was YHH. We had the Tradition Holiday Classic down in Prior Lake. I saw plenty of college jackets down there. NTDP was there as well. A lot of talent on display that weekend. That went well. A couple of youth girls tournaments as well. But I'm just kind of, to be honest, I'm just kind of itching for. I'm glad the World Juniors is over in a sense, and I'm excited for the teams to get back at it here in the second half of the season.
And I know that the whole Quinn Hughes thing is like old news now, honestly, because it's been a while. But I gotta say, like, this is just a funny story that I wasn't paying attention to social media the day that that happened because I think it was when my daughter was sick and it was like we were watching a movie, whatever. And I
Yeah.
checked my phone. I think I was like looking at my Apple Watch. I'm like, oh, I'm getting these messages, and I look, and it's our group chat, and it's you, Ryan, going Quinn Hughes! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! I was like, wait a second. So now I feel like I'll always know like what happened that day because I wasn't paying attention to anything and I was like, I think I told my husband like I need a minute to check something really quick. Like, oh my gosh. But then we were sad because we were big Marco Rossi fans. But oh well, it's old news now. Very
Well,
old.
since we're talking Quinn Hughes and talking college hockey, a couple of interesting connections. I've talked to him a little bit about this since he's been here. Number one, his freshman year at Michigan, his final game of his freshman year was at what was then called XL Energy Center, now Grand Casino Arena. They Michigan made the Frozen Four that year, 2018. It was in St. Paul, and if folks will remember, that was the game they were tied with Notre Dame and the Fighting Irish scored with 3 seconds left to win the to win the semifinal game. It was just absolute kick in the teeth for Michigan to have their season end that way. So that was Quinn Hughes. That was the end of his freshman season. He played one more season at Michigan. They didn't do as well that year, and his final collegiate game was at 3M Arena at Mariucci, and he couldn't play because he had a bone bruise on his foot. So the last time he ever left a college hockey rink as a player, he was on crutches. So how about those two memories of Minnesota if you're Quinn Hughes? And
Wow.
glad that he
Wow.
seems to like it here now, but yeah, not great times in Minnesota with his 2 years of college hockey.
Wow. Well, I know that that's all really old news now, but I thought for the show today, obviously, I know it's different because Tony's not here, but I thought we could just do kind of like a New Year's check-in with each team because obviously each team has played a lot of games since we last recorded, so I don't want to go through every single game that they played. We'll kind of just go through the teams that we normally talk about, maybe just say any notable wins or losses, what they did over the last month, and then their NPI rank at the moment, since that's starting to kind of come into play a little bit. And then I also put like their standing in their conference currently, because that's going to start to get relevant too. I didn't do these in any particular order, so nobody come at me. I just did them in the way that my brain typed them on the sheet. Um, and just the first team that I have on here is Bemidji State. And I think, was it you before the last time we recorded that said Bemidji State, find out who you are? Or was that Augustine? I don't remember. Maybe both of
No,
them.
I asked that about the Beavers and still looking for an answer there. Still haven't quite figured that one out.
Still don't really know. Their scores over the past month include a loss and a shootout win to Augustana and a shootout win over Minnesota. And that was a game where obviously the Gophers, I know, were missing some players. So obviously take that score as you will. But Bemidji State currently overall record 9-8-3. Their NPI rank is 28. So obviously that doesn't look super great at this time of the year. But in the CCHA, kind of interestingly enough, they are third right now. So I don't know. I'm kind of with you, Jess. I just don't really know. I feel like they've had some good wins, but it's not good enough right now that they'd have a very, very long way to make the tournament. They'd have to probably like win out the rest of their games if they're at 28, unless they are able to pull off a conference tournament win here. But I don't know how to feel about them. It's a little
Yeah,
confusing.
that seems to me that it looks like that's going to be the path for the Beavers in the second half, is they're going to have to, finish either in the top, two in the conference and win the conference playoff or something like that if they're going to get in because they haven't found that gear yet. I will say, beating Minnesota, yep, it was a shootout. yep, it was an exhibition, so it doesn't count. Yeah, Minnesota had some players gone and their coach gone at World Juniors, whatever. That still means a lot to BSU. I mean, that's still, the Gophers are the team everybody in Minnesota wants to beat. So good for them. And, I think they got a good crowd for that one in Bemidji. So, and also, I've talked about this before, but I'm impressed by Bob Motzko that he, insists on playing the in-state teams when he can. And he, from his background, being at St. Cloud for as long as he was, he knows, the challenge of getting games. He also knows what it means to have the Gophers come into your building, and he's kind of made that commitment to the in-state rivalries, and I'm impressed by that. Even if it's an exhibition, get the team up to some of these other buildings and get some games in there, and that's important.
So I think Bemidji State, we still kind of don't know, but at this point, it's not looking super great just with their record and with their rank in the NPI. So, like you said, Jess, they're just going to have to probably win the conference tournament here, which going to be a little tough because the next team I have on my list is Augustana. And they've been kind of surprising some people. I feel like even for us, we've kind of been hot and cold on them a little bit. They'll have a couple really good results and then have a few kind of head scratchers every once in a while. But over the past month and a half or so, they've played a lot of games. They did not really take a winter break if you look at their schedule. They had a win and then a shootout loss to Bemidji State, a win and a shootout win to Minnesota State. So that's really big for them. They split with Nebraska Omaha, and then they just recently swept CC, which is a really good result for them too. So currently they're all the way up to 13 in the NPI, which is super cool to see. But in the CCHA, they're like fourth. So a little weird sometimes when you look at like the NPI versus like the conference standings is always funny sometimes how high one team can be, but like not that many conference points.
It's interestingly enough, too, the Vikings were shorthanded not on the ice, but their coach, Garrett Raboin, was part of the World Junior staff. So they've been doing a lot of what they did in December with kind of a shorthanded coaching staff, which, good for them and good for his assistants stepping in. And let's face it, you played 4 games against NCHC teams and you won 3 of them. That looks really good in the NPI. That's why they're suddenly on the bubble, and what a huge feat that would be for Augustana to be truly in the NCAA tournament mix here in the next couple of months. In what, their 3rd year is it, or 4th year maybe as a true Division I program? Good for them.
For sure. So they're kind of the CCHA kind of team to look at right now because they're ranked 13 in the NPI, and we'll get to Minnesota State later, but they're 14. So Augustana, kind of that sneaky team. Everyone always thinks about the Mavericks, but it might be the Vikings right now is the highest team in the NPI. I keep trying to say the pairwise, but I gotta correct myself.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
yeah, it's weird to do that. Or even Googling it, I was about to put in pairwise on my phone, and then I was like, nope, don't do that. Doesn't matter. So that's kind of crazy. But and then the Vikings too, just for some context, their record right now is 12-6-3 overall. Thought I'd throw that in there. St. Cloud, I did watch a chunk of their games this past weekend. Their overall record 10-10 right now, so 50-50. Over the past month, they were swept by North Dakota. They split with Denver, so obviously that one win was big. And then they played in the Cactus Cup in Southern California. It was them, Minnesota State, Yale, and UMass Lowell. Very kind of cool to have all those different teams from different conferences, but they won the Cactus Cup. They beat Yale and then they beat Lowell. So that was kind of fun to watch those games, even though puck drop was at like 9 p.m. Central Time. A little brutal for me, who goes to bed early. But for them, NPI rank 20. So you're not completely out of it, but you need some big wins here in the second half and do pretty good. And in the NCHC, they're not sitting too hot right now. They're at 6. So they'd need a big weekend this weekend. I don't know. I still don't know how I feel about St. Cloud. Jess, I kind of feel like them with Bemidji, where some games I watch and I have no idea what they're doing out there. And other games I'm like, wow, that was a big win. They really scrapped for that. And I don't know. I have no idea. So I'd imagine it'd be an uphill climb for them to make the tournament this year, but they're not completely out of it yet. So hard to
No,
say.
only 20th in the NPI. I mean, that's certainly within striking distance, especially with NCHC games are like count for like double, it seems like when it comes to these computer rankings. So you win some games in the second half and you're right back in there. Now, I will say that series with Denver was tough because they probably should have won both of those games and just, didn't get the sweep. And when you're that close to getting, all the points in a weekend, you certainly want to do that. So that one hurt him a little bit. Cactus Cup, well, kind of fun. You're out in Palm Springs. It's good for kind of the visibility of the program. I did see Brett Larson say, by the way, that for some reason his flight back got canceled, so he had to stay out there
Oh,
an extra day. And somehow he managed. I don't know if it was the golf course or the pool or what, whatever it was that he used to pass his time there. But yeah, good for that program.
yeah, the Cactus Cup seems kind of cool. I think it's the second time they've done that. I want to say it's at the Coachella Valley Arena.
I think that's correct. Yeah, and that's kind of in the Palm Springs area.
Yeah,
Yep.
normally I'd love to go to tournaments like that. And I thought about going this year with my family until I realized the puck drops are so late that I literally was trying to watch the Yale game and I was like falling asleep in the first period. So,
I will say, speaking of tournaments in unique places, I have some friends from here in the Twin Cities, but their family is in Ireland, so they had planned a trip to Ireland over the holidays anyway. They left, I think, right after Christmas and spent some time in Dublin, some time in Belfast, and kind of seeing family and whatever. Well, these are friends, a friend of mine that went to UMD when I was there. As dumb luck would have it, the Bulldogs women's team was playing in the Friendship Four in Belfast. So here they
Oh,
showed up in their Bulldogs gear, to go watch women's college hockey in
that game did
Belfast.
not turn out great either. I watched that on my YouTube stream actually. Very random. I watched that game and it was awesome because the announcer had an accent and he was
Yep.
killing it. It was so cool.
Yeah, the Belfast Giants are the team there that that plays in the kind of the British League, and they're very popular. Yeah, I listened to one of the games at UMD and Harvard, and it went to overtime. A really good game. UMD had a player named O'Brien. Well, that was clearly the favorite of either
oh yeah.
good Irish name. And on TV or on the YouTube stream, it looked like big crowd. Some friends, my friends who were there sent me a couple of pictures from the building. It was one of those deals where they had put all the crowd opposite from the TV cameras, and the other side of the building was literally empty. But whatever. Good that folks are watching college hockey in unique places like that. Whatever it takes to grow the game, I guess.
I love, yeah, the tournaments in random places. I love traveling to see games like that. That's awesome. Yeah, I watched that and it was awesome. So
Good stuff.
all those teams have a good time going.
And if you're planning a trip to Ireland, by the way, Bulldog fans, the UMB men play there next year. In I think it's a Thanksgiving tournament they have for the men in Belfast. So our friend Matt Wellens from the Duluth News Tribune covered all of it over there and had a nice travel blog with all the fun stuff to see in Ireland. There's a museum dedicated to the Titanic in Belfast because that's where the Titanic was built. And among the many things to see and do there.
That's awesome. And then obviously we have more teams just going down the line here. The Gophers right now, they didn't play a ton of games the break that we had over the time we didn't record, but over the past kind of month and a half here, I think we already talked about the Ohio State one, but win in overtime loss to Ohio State, and then that shootout loss to Bemidji we already talked about, and again those players were gone, that type of thing. So not really a ton to talk about with them to be honest. But their NPI right now is 32. And in the Big Ten, they're tied for fourth. I want to say it's with Penn State. So it'd be it's they're pretty much out of the tournament unless they win the Big Ten, which obviously anything's possible with the conference tournaments, but that it looks like is going to be their kind of way into the tournament this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Still trying to figure things out in goal, still trying to figure things out on defense, and they've had a ton of injuries. Not to make excuses. It was weird talking to Bob Motzko while he was coaching the World Junior team because I said, I had a one-on-one with him and said, is it weird to just shut off everything Gophers and just be focused on Team USA? But it's something he had done before, and obviously he had some of his staff with him. Steve Miller, his top assistant coach for the Gophers, is a guy that has been around, the World Juniors, I think 9 out of the last 10 times. So he's kind of Mr. World Juniors, and good to have them back in Minneapolis doing their thing with the getting back into the Big Ten schedule here.
So not a ton to talk about with them, but obviously we'll just see kind of how the Big Ten plays out because the Big Ten's been kind of crazy this year with all the different teams in there. It's been fun
Yep.
watching CHC. It's been fun watching the Big Ten. And obviously a couple big games could improve the NPI, but at 32, probably just gonna have to win the tournament with that.
Got some work to do. You know that loss they had earlier in the season to Long Island is just a killer as far as the NPI goes because that's such an anchor on your computer rankings. And I mean, it was funny that was like in late November, and that night people were saying, "Well, okay, win the Big Ten tournament and you get in. That's pretty much your only route." And that was, about Thanksgiving time.
But before we get into the other teams here, we want to thank one of our sponsors. We'll talk about APX and our summit scores later. But big thanks to the USHL for sponsoring this show. We also took a break with our junior hockey pod that we'll be recording actually tonight, the same night we're recording this. And we're going to have a huge episode, tons to talk about. I know everybody's been talking about the USHL lately and the great development they provide, especially because I'll mention this later in the show. Tynan Lawrence, who's going to be a first round draft pick this summer, is being added to the BU roster for the second half. So we love the USHL. They provide great development for their players. And we got a couple of players that are going to be super, super good here coming into college hockey, like Tynan Lawrence. And everybody's going to learn his name, I think, pretty quick, but I'll mention him later in the show. But kind of back to, or if you
The
got
fact the fact that they had Cole Iserman and all of that talent they already have, they needed to add this guy too. That just doesn't seem fair, does it? Come on.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure everybody's like, wow, BU grabbing another top end, first round draft pick. Wow, really, really unheard of. I've never heard of that before. But to get back kind of into our college teams, North Dakota is definitely the team that we cover on this show that's doing the best right now, just in terms of standings. They're 16-4 right now. Over the past month and a half, they swept St. Cloud, they swept Omaha, they swept Mercyhurst. Their last loss was actually November 15th. So, I mean, North Dakota's just been really solid here so far this year. And the NPI, they're ranked 2 last time I checked, and they're first in the NCHC. So for them, they're just gonna, I think, gonna try to keep chugging along here because they're kind of killing it right now.
Absolutely. And, getting to talk to Will Zellers a little bit at World Juniors and seeing what he did at World Juniors. Interestingly enough, a late addition to the roster. He wasn't on the initial roster. And then I think, he probably scored in about every game for Team USA, just had really put on a show for a Twin Cities kid. And, kind of fun talking to him. I talked to Caleb Heil too, who's headed there next year. To play goalie for them. Caleb is with the Madison Capitals right now and is doing really well there. But it was just fun talking to those guys about, how much fun they're going to have next year playing for North Dakota. And I have a confession to make. Okay, on one of our previous podcasts, I said that, the team to beat in the NCHC is Minnesota Duluth. I can admit it. I was wrong. With what North Dakota did in the past month, and with the talent they have, and just the way they're playing generally, North Dakota is clearly in the driver's seat, and good for them. They've got the talent under a first year coach. You kind of never know how things are going to go, but they seem to have not really missed a beat at all. So North Dakota is the team everybody's going to be gunning for in the second half. Be ready, Fighting Hawks.
Yeah, and I feel like too, if you're Will Zellers, I feel like after, not originally thinking you're going to be in World Juniors and then going and dominating like that, that would just give you so much confidence to come back to college hockey. I
Absolutely.
wouldn't be surprised if he just like goes on a crazy tear here in the second half because why not? I feel like that would just amp you up so much to be like, I made them put me on the team because I was playing so well, and then I think he led USA in points, I think.
I think
So
he did. Yeah. And
absolutely.
North Dakota had players on Team Canada as well. And what's interesting about that is, Canada came home with the bronze. UMB, or excuse me, USA bowed out in the first round of the medal round. So, you got guys with kind of a chip on their shoulder too. Like, World Juniors didn't. It was a great experience, but it didn't go as well as I wanted. Now I got work to do to prove that I'm still worthy. Whatever they use to motivate themselves in the second half.
So North Dakota, they just kind of got to keep doing what they're doing right now. Not a ton that they're probably going to change. Minnesota Duluth, obviously we just talked about them. Jesse just mentioned them. They're 14-6 right now. Over the last month and a half, they split with Western Michigan, split with Arizona State, and then won a recent exhibition game against Manitoba. In the NPI, they're 4, and in the NCHC standings, they're 3. So obviously they'd be definitely into the tournament right now. I know I put in a little note in here too, but I know Max Plant didn't play that last game, or I don't know if it was game or two, but I know game for sure of World Juniors. So I think everybody is kind of holding their breath, hoping that he'll be able to be back for them here in the second half.
That would obviously be a huge loss if he's not good to go. And yeah, he missed I think the last two games for Team USA after a hot start for them and doing really well. So we're all kind of hopeful that he's going to make a comeback here in the second half because he's legitimately in the Hobie conversation. We've talked about him a little bit. Another Bulldog, Adam Kleber, was on the Team USA as well. Talked to him a little bit. He's a guy I look up to, literally. I didn't realize he was that big. I mean, he looks like he's about 6'6". It's just a monster of a player, and obviously a nice addition for them. So, yeah, the Bulldogs have some work to do in the second half. They're obviously chasing North Dakota now, and want to stay healthy and all of that. But that will be interesting to see how that race shapes out as well.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely in the tournament just based on NPI, but if they want to win the NCHC, they got a little bit of points to get, and obviously you want to stay healthy as well. So we'll see how that pans out.
One quick note on UMD, by the way, since we're talking about this. I was going to just add quickly too, since we're talking about UMD, kind of a sad note, but maybe a hopeful note as well. If you've been around UMD hockey anytime in the last 40 years, you've heard of Dale Hogginson, known as Hoagie to everybody in Duluth. He's got his own bobblehead. He's a celebrated member of kind of the Bulldogs team organization. He's been kind of an unofficial equipment manager for them going back all the way to the 1980s. Dale, I want to say, is in his 60s now. Sadly, I think it was on Christmas Day, he suffered a stroke and has been hospitalized, and the outpouring of support has been huge. But if you're a person who prays, please keep Hoagie in your prayers and your thoughts. And that's he's a big part of college hockey in Duluth, and well known everywhere you go. So Hoagie, we wish you all the best, and hope you're on the road to recovery real soon.
For sure. And then with Minnesota Duluth too, we kind of already talked about them, but they're doing pretty good in the NPI, but might have a little bit of work to do in the NCHC standings if they want to win that. But we'll kind of see on the injury front if we get anything here over the next week on any news or notes or updates on any players on their team and guys coming back from World Juniors and all that. Um,
1993, by the way. Just want to
oh,
point out that reminder. 1993, last time UMD won a regular season conference title. So, and obviously they've won three national championships since then. So, yeah, it would be cool to win the NCHC, but
they
not a
don't.
requirement. Yeah, Scott Sandelin has made it clear that, and not a big deal in the long run when you can compete for the big one, as they call it at the end.
For sure. And that looks like that might be kind of what they're doing right now as well. So we'll see if that kind of keeps going here throughout the second half. Team here that's not too far out of it right now, St. Thomas, 11-7-3 overall record. Their past scores over the last month and a half here. They split with Lake State, they split with NMU, and then they swept Northern Michigan and they swept Ferris. Sorry, so they split with Lake State and then swept the other two. So pretty typical scores for the most part, but their NPI is doing pretty good. They're at 19, so really not too far out of it. Obviously, being in the CCHA, you're not going to want to drop any bad games, and you're going to have to win kind of all of them. But in the CCHA, they're ranked number two. So for them, they could be doing better, but I'd say that's actually a pretty decent spot right now to be if you're the Tommies.
Over the holidays too, they had kind of a cool reunion at Anderson Arena, bringing back three of the previous Tommy's coaches back from the Division III era, Enrico Blasi with them, including Terry Skripek, who was there seemingly forever from the '80s, throughout a lot of the '90s, and did some really good stuff at the Division III level for them. So kind of a cool moment, kind of a nod to history at St. Thomas as they embark on this new adventure with the new rink and what they're doing in Division One.
And for St. Thomas, I know we've kind of talked about their wheel of rotating goalies a little bit, but I have to shout out one of our own APX guys, Carson Musser, played a chunk in December and went 3-0. And I want to say he was also the CCHA goalie of the month. I think I saw that, not sure, but shout out to him. Obviously, that's super cool to see. And we'll see if they stay with him or if they keep rotating like all of their goalies because it seems like they've all played a chunk for them.
Yeah, Ryan, I was going to ask Ryan, did you play any goalie for St. Thomas over the holiday break? Because we just want to make sure, because you just never know who's going to be in there with the big pads on.
I did not know. I know they kind of looked at me just because of my size, but
Sure,
no,
absolutely.
I did not. I said I'm good with my camera in the corner. I don't have the tracking ability per se.
Yeah. Good problem to have, having too many goalies, or there's a school of thought that says if you have more than one goalie, you don't have any goalies because if you don't know who your number one guy is, then you've got real problems.
For sure. And then last but certainly not least, also in the CCHA, currently ranked number one in the conference, 12-5-5, Minnesota State. Their NPI is 14. So obviously, if you're them, you'd want to get that up a little bit in case you don't win the auto bid. So could be doing a little bit better. They've had kind of a weird last month and a half here. They split with Ferris, obviously not great. And then they had a loss and a shootout loss to Augustana. Obviously, you'd want way more points than that. And then kind of just other ones, they got to play Team Switzerland in an exhibition prior to World Juniors, which is kind of cool. That was a shootout loss, I guess, but cool that they got to play them and kind of see
Absolutely.
the differences between the two. I thought that was interesting. And then they played in the Cactus Cup with St. Cloud, but they lost their first game to UMass Lowell, and then they beat Yale. So loss and a win, but not an amazing last month and a half here. I was getting kind of high on Mankato, honestly, before we took a break, and then now I'm less high on them. I'm less certain about them right now.
It's interesting, to see kind of under the hood what's going on there because they're clearly, I think we're in a lull in December, and maybe some time away did them some good. The trip out to California was probably a little bit of a bonding experience. I just have learned you never count the Mavericks out. It doesn't seem to matter what year it is, who the goalie is, who the coach is, anything like that. They're always a team that's going to be there at the end.
Yeah, and I think I saw, I don't remember who posted it on Twitter. So whoever posted this, shout out to you, but they were doing some like bracketology of like if the tournament was today, who'd play who. And they said there was a chance that Minnesota State could play Wisconsin in the first round. And
How good would that be? Come on.
super, super fun if that ended up happening. But obviously we have plenty of time left, but that'd be awesome. So whoever found that out, shout out to you. That's super cool. So that's kind of all the teams that
I
we
was going to say, speaking of Wisconsin, since you brought them up, another nugget from World Juniors. Tony Granato called most of the games on TV. Former Badgers coach, former Badgers player. Tony had a cancer scare year and a half ago. Talked to him a few times in St. Paul. He's doing fantastic. So that's really, really good to see. One of the just great guys in hockey. Didn't work out long term for him as the coach of the Badgers, but he did win a Big Ten title while he was there, and is seemingly enjoying his life, doing some TV work. I think with the Blackhawks, and then doing World Juniors and stuff like that. So good for Tony. Good to see him, and he's healthy and he's happy, and that's good.
nice. That's awesome. Before we get into just other games and other notables here, another shout out to our other sponsor, APX. APX Hockey, if you have any training and development needs or you want an awesome advisor, we have that for you if you go to apx-hockey.com. Kind of just to brag a bit about our advisors recently, we had 3 commitments in the last like 2 weeks. Cam Merrick of Minnetonka committed to Ferris State. His brother's committed there too. Trey Peck, one of my longtime favorite players, he's in the BC right now, committed to West Point. Shout out to him. And Owen Korkish, who played for Park, just committed to St. Thomas. I just talked to him last night. So if you want an awesome advisor, some awesome training, apx-hockey.com. Also, if you click on the news tab, I have my annual transfer portal stats up. So if you want to deep dive into that, I got you. But we got plenty of other notable games, just other notable things to talk about. Just, I think we all kind of saw this coming. Penn State has a ton of time off. They don't really do anything over the last month and a half, but they play RIT to come back and they lose the first game. Who would have seen that coming?
Yeah, little they
We
say
all
Rust never sleeps. Well, Rust is a factor when you haven't played in like a month and a half or whatever it was. Obviously, Penn State with some players missing too. Gavin McKenna most notable. And another World Juniors note. Canada got the bronze medal. Gavin McKenna didn't impress some people, let's just say. He was went into the season as the cut and dried number one draft pick, and everybody figured he would be going first overall in the NHL, and that still could happen. But not the unbeatable superstar maybe that some people thought he could be, and unfair to place that kind of pressure on any kid, but that's just a fact of the game. So some work to do for the Nittany Lions in the second half of the season.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see if the second half he kind of lets that fuel him and he goes on kind of a hot streak here, or if it kind of just continues with Penn State and they're just really up and down, and we're kind of like, okay, well, we'll see how they do. One really interesting thing that I saw from all of the main college hockey beat writers recently was Lindenwood played Canisius. They outshot them 75 to 26, and Canisius still
Oh.
wins by one. It was a 72 save game from their goalie, whose name is Petter Vikstrom Stumer. So at least in my time covering college hockey, I have not heard of a 60 or even 70 save game. Like that is just, I don't know. I saw that and I thought it was a typo because that's ridiculous.
Lindenwood's new coach, Keith Fisher, who's a Minnesota guy, came there after years and years and years at Penn State studying under that Guy Gadowski system where you have one rule, just shoot the puck. It doesn't matter where you are. You could be at middle of the ice, you could be on the boards, you could be below the goal line. Just shoot the puck. That's all they do. Apparently that has translated over to the Lions of Lindenwood in his new gig. But yeah, what a crazy game. And hey, memorable night for the goalie. And I hope he got the next night off because, man, he probably had to be pretty tired after that one.
Oh gosh. Yeah, and apparently it obviously was a Atlantic hockey record, I think for sure, and probably close to records and all the other record books as well. So shout out to him. And then this is a segment that usually I don't feel like there's much movement midway through the season. There's always one or two guys maybe that leave or that are added, but it's not super common. And now in the era of major juniors being eligible and all that, I feel like we have a ton of movement over Christmas break that happened. It kind of was blowing me away a little bit. And I won't talk about like all of these guys in depth, but one of the main ones I wanted to update everybody on is we kept talking about on the show Miami's goalie from Russia, Shika Godzeyev. We kept going, what's up with him? You know, he wasn't eligible, he wasn't playing, he was just kind of sitting out. And Miami, I forgot, you know, when or who exactly typed it out, but they put out a thing that just said like they couldn't get him eligible, I guess. So it looks like he's playing pro in Europe now. I assume it must have been an academic eligibility thing because I don't think he ever played pro games before coming here. So it had to have been an academic thing. I have no idea.
Let me just say, assuming it was an academic issue that kept him out of school, I'm actually really glad about that. Not for him personally. I'm just glad that they still have some standards of what can and can't get you into college now. I mean, it seems like, you've got guys who played in the AHL last season who are playing college hockey this year. I
Yep.
guess I'm old-fashioned enough to find it refreshing that there's still a standard out there somehow that you have to do this, this, and this to play college hockey, and it's not maybe the free-for-all that it seems to be.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what the exact situation was, but I'm pretty sure that it wasn't like pro games thing or anything. I think I heard it was yeah, getting him eligible by the NCAA for like academic stuff. I'm not all sure what goes into that. But because they couldn't get him eligible, Miami did add a goalie, I believe, from the queue to kind of round things out because obviously I think they were planning on him being a starter. And then as
Sure.
a few guys leaving for the guys not necessarily with many points, so maybe not a huge deal for these teams, but Justin Cloutier, I'd assume is how you say his name, of Arizona State, returns to the OHL. He only played in 4 games this year. Teddy Spitznagel of Michigan leaves for the OHL. He didn't play in any games for Michigan this year, so not surprising on those. One that I am a little bit surprised, a guy that I've interviewed before, Gavin Cornforth of BC, is leaving to play in the Q. He was a really good USHL player in the past. But I think for them, for BC, they have all these all-star guys that even if you're a really solid player, it's hard to get playing time there. So I think with them making a big ad that we'll talk about here soon, that maybe for him, he's like, I'll go back to juniors and maybe I'll find another spot where I'll get kind of that playing time because he's a guy that could absolutely be a high level player. But a little surprised by that. One I saw today, Minnesotan Joe Grammer of Moorhead. He was playing for Omaha, leaves. He's going to play, I guess, in Seattle of the Dub for the second half of the season. I don't think he has any more juniors eligibility after that. So just the second half of the year. A couple guys leaving for the ECHL, very odd. That doesn't happen very often. A St. Cloud State defenseman, Caleb Thiessen. He played a little bit, but he never registered any points. He was a junior. Leaves for the ECHL along with a guy from Northeastern who graduated early, I heard. So not super surprising with those. And then another guy from Northeastern left to play Division 3. So not super crazy, but kind of interesting seeing all the movement going to and from juniors. And just to, I don't know if you have any thoughts on if we're going to see this more and more in the future, just with guys kind of pondering their options, if this is going to be kind of more of a thing of if you're not finding success or playing time, they're going to head back to major junior or wherever they came from.
I think this was an inevitable byproduct of Major Junior opening itself up to college hockey players. In is that, a guy comes to college and, halfway through the year, I mean, you mentioned a guy, played 4 games at Arizona State, 0 points. He's got an agent talking to him. He's got a family talking to him saying, hey, you know what? This isn't the right place for you. You go back someplace else. The worst case scenario is you've got a guy who's a good player who says, hey, why am I not on the first power play unit? I'm going to leave if you don't promote me. That really kind of ties a coach's hands. But like you mentioned too, the Spitznagel at Michigan hasn't played there yet. Michigan's a really, really rock solid team, and that's a tough lineup to crack. So he's maybe looking at, go back, play another half year in juniors, and maybe find a different college where I can, go succeed, get an education, whatever it happens to be.
For sure. And then mid-season additions, there's a couple, and a lot of them were pretty big. We already talked a little bit about Tynan Lawrence. He's headed to BU. That's going to be a guy that Terriers fans are going to get to know pretty well because he's a guy that, if people aren't super high on Gavin McKenna or the other prospects that might be, those possible first overalls, he's a guy that could absolutely compete with that if he has a good showing in the second half for BU. And obviously, if you're BU too, they've been kind of up and down. They are gonna probably love getting him and adding him to their lineup. CC is adding a player, Mats Lindgren, defender. He's a Buffalo draft pick. He played mainly in the ECHL last year, but he's one of those weird guys who's going to play college now, even after playing AHL games. Very strange. I will never get used to that. Um, BC
And if you're CC, I mean, you could
yeah,
use a spark right now. Let's be honest. The Tigers just, are kind of stagnated.
yeah,
I think it was 2, 3 years ago. I was interviewing Chris Mayotte about taking over that program and just kind of the high hopes. And he's still a young and up and coming coach, but they haven't, as a program, yet kind of made the jump that maybe some of us were expecting. And I think adding some bodies at this point in the year is probably a good thing for them.
for sure. So that'll be a interesting one. I'm always curious to see how guys in the ECHL adapt to college because I never thought that would happen. So very curious to see how those guys do. I mentioned with BC, Gavin Cornforth left, but BC adds Oscar Hemming, who's a guy. There was some eligibility issue where he wasn't getting cleared to play in like major junior, I guess, or something with his contract back in Europe. Some long thing that I don't know all the details on, but instead now he's joining college hockey. He's joining BC. And he's another guy who's going to be a top prospect for the draft this year. So always risky adding young players, but I heard from some people who I think he played in a game already that he looked really good. So that'll be a good ad for them. Minnesotan here, shout out Aaron Ryerson. We already knew that he had previously committed to Alaska Anchorage. He actually joined them for the second half, an assist in his first game played for the Seawolves. Shout out him. And Northern Michigan adds a goalie from the USHL and a defender from the BCHL. And we said we already know Northern Michigan's struggling a little bit, so adding some guys. Not sure if that's just injury related or other. They just need to spark a little bit. So a couple ads there. Some injury notes for some big guys. We already talked about Max Plant. We'll see if he's back or not immediately for UMD. Tanner Henricks, I heard, was possibly skating for St. Cloud. I don't think he's ready to be back quite yet, but hopefully within the next month here. I think it was Mark Diver tweet that Jeremy Wilmer of Quinnipiac could be out now for the rest of the season. That'd be a big blow for Quinnipiac.
That's a big loss, yeah.
Yeah, and starting Providence goalie Philip Svidbak, I think is how you say his name. Sorry if I butchered that. He was injured in a game like this past weekend. I think I saw him hopping off the ice, and it sounded like pending the results of some doctor's appointments and scans, he might be out a while. So that'd be big. He's their starting goalie. And yeah, I don't know if you guys had any other notes on World Juniors or the Spengler Cup. I didn't really watch a ton. I heard the Spengler Cup was awesome and the fans loved the college guys and they had a good showing. So that's super exciting. I saw the locker room cam at one point or the audio from it with Guy Godowski, and that was honestly amazing. I love that. But it seems like it was a great experience for those guys, and I'm excited they played in it.
I want to give a quick shout out to Zamplant from UMD because he played on that team, and I talked to his parents. Well, they were all World Juniors. They pretty much ignored the fact that their other son was playing in Switzerland. I said, "Which of you is going to fly over and see him on?" No, we're going to stay here. They said, "So Zam, we were cheering for you anyway, even if your mom and dad couldn't make it over there." And yeah, it sounds like that was just a fantastic experience for those kids, and did much better than anybody expected. Played for the championship in that tournament and beat one of the European pro teams they played against. So a cool thing for them, and cool thing for college hockey too. Again, getting a little more recognition in places like Switzerland. And the other thing I'll say, you guys saw the pictures from that barn in Davos or wherever it was.
Yeah.
That's on my hockey bucket list now. I have got to see a game in that place. Just looked like one of those wooden barns with like just seats tucked into every nook and cranny there. Next time I'm in Europe, I'm making a stop to go there. I say next time I'm in Europe, like I fly there all the time. I've been there once in my life, but yeah, that looked like just a fantastic place to watch a hockey game.
Yeah, it seemed awesome. So I was super happy for all those guys and they did well. And I was reading some of the tweets, I think it was from Schlossman a little bit too, of just saying it sounded like a lot of the locals were super into the collegiate team and they were all cheering for them a little bit at times and fans just really liked them. So love that.
Because everybody loves the Americans internationally right now, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
you'd
I'm
think that
kidding.
they wouldn't like us, but
We're
apparently
we're not getting into politics. I'm kidding.
they thought the college team was really good. So that was fun to see. Um, but some other guys here, we're not going to go through all the Summit scores. Obviously, that would take way too long. A couple first collegiate goals, though. Shout out Joe Belisle, White Bear Lake, playing at St. Cloud, got his first collegiate goal. Weston Knox at Wisconsin, he's an Andover guy. Tucker Ness for Arizona State got his, I believe. And then a bunch of guys that we normally talk about, but a few that stuck out to me recently. Colin Potter has had like 1,000 goals every time I check the box scores. I think Tony put Colin Potter times six on the last Summit scores.
Nice.
So he's just him and Bennett Shimmick are just and Cruz Lucius are all just killing it right now. Doing super good. Otherwise, a lot of just the normal suspects on here. Jack Kernan had a good weekend for North Dakota. Attila Lepai had some. Adam Marshall, shout out Joe Miller, Mason Pullman, a lot of guys on here. Carson Reed, um, yeah, Jordan Rowe.
For Minnesota Wild fans out there, remember how we were preaching patience with Charlie Stramel after a year or two when they were ready to call him a bust and first
Oh,
round
wow.
pick and all that? Man, has he evolved this year for Michigan State and really becoming the player that I guess the Wild scouting staff thought and knew that he could be. He will be I think a nice addition to this Wild team if and when he decides to make the jump.
Yeah, that's been awesome seeing him kind of prove some of the haters wrong this year. I feel like I've seen the same a lot with Dean Letourneau as well at BC. Everybody was like, "Oh, they picked him way too high in 2024. He was a first round pick, and then he had 3 assists last year, and everyone was freaking out." I'm like, "You guys, this is a very young guy who's like 6'7". Like, maybe give him some time." And now he's got over a point per game. So sometimes I feel like people, it's like just let them do their thing.
Yep.
They'll
And
be
having talked to Charlie at development camp and a couple places too. I mean, he's handled all of it really well. I saw just a funny tweet when he was drafted. It was Wild fans, we need centers. Wild fans, we need centers. Wild fans, we need centers. Then they draft a center, and Wild fans are like, "Oh, not that guy though." It's like,
yeah.
hey, give him a chance. Wait and see.
A center with size is yeah.
Exactly.
Everybody wants that.
Yep.
Um, a few other guys on Summit scores. Already said Jordan Ron, Tyler Rollwagon, Nick Sajovic, Jake Snyder. I think had maybe it was a game winner, not sure. And then a bunch of the usual suspects, but then Gunnar Thorson had one I know for St. Lawrence, Blake Steenerson, Aiden Willis at Air Force, shout out. But there's like 1,000, so you can go look them up on Twitter. I'm
I,
not gonna.
I want to say too, another shout out, William Whitelaw, who started out at Wisconsin, transferred to Western Michigan, as the hockey gods have a sense of humor. Of course, Wisconsin and Western Michigan wind up playing one another in the championship of the tournament in Milwaukee every year that I've actually been to. It's played at the Bucks Arena right there in downtown Milwaukee.
Quick
And
trip.
Yeah.
holiday
Yeah,
face-off
quick
tournament.
tip holiday face-off. They do a nice job with it. Milwaukee is a great town, by the way. Too bad they never got an NHL team because good sports town.
Oh yeah.
But Whitelaw, I think, had two or three goals in the title game and winds up being player of the tournament and all that. Playing against his former team. So good for him.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was watching a couple clips from that tournament and I agree, Milwaukee, underrated city. Love it.
I'll say this though, since we're talking about Milwaukee,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Bradley Center, the former home of the Bucks, that opened in like 1988 and was their home until 10 years ago, maybe before they built, I think it's called Fiserv Forum, which is the new home of the Bucks. The Bradley Center was a fantastic hockey arena. The Milwaukee Admirals played there. It was built in hopes that Milwaukee would get an NHL team. Now, the owners of the Chicago Blackhawks for years have said, nope, no way. You're not going to put another team 75 miles away from us or whatever it happens to be. So, for all intents and purposes, that idea is dead of Milwaukee getting an NHL team. But the Bradley Center, just a fantastic place to watch a game, fantastic place to cover a game. I covered a Frozen Four there, I want to say three times. Great place. The new place is nice, but they didn't design it to accommodate hockey very well. And that's disappointing because they basically have like 11,000 seats that are good for hockey in this new place. And
Yeah,
and to me, that's a disappointment when you had such a fantastic hockey building right in downtown Milwaukee that you didn't do the same with the new building.
for sure. And then kind of just one last thing, some upcoming games. Obviously, now that we're back from break, pretty much all the teams are back in action here. So I'll read these off, and then obviously, if there's any interesting ones, we can talk about them. Minnesota at Penn State. This will be kind of interesting. Minnesota hasn't played a ton over the break, but they played more than Penn State. And obviously, Penn State coming off of a not so hot weekend to RIT. That'll be interesting because I think they're tied in the Big Ten standings right now. So that could be a fun one. Bemidji State plays Michigan Tech. That'll be a good CCHA game for sure because I think Tech is pretty good right now too. Augustana at Northern Michigan, going to be looking for the sweep there. St. Cloud State is at Nebraska Omaha. They really need to take a majority of those points from the Omahomies, as I like to call them, for the NCHC standings purposes and
That's
for them to
that's
get
one of those that's one of those series I like to joke about. Always pick the more desperate team. Well, who's the more desperate team when St. Cloud State plays Nebraska Omaha? Because they're both kind of right in that
back.
lower to middle portion of the NCHC, and both are desperately in need of points. So
And
that should be a fun one.
I love the Omaha fans. They're always like super nice. But it's like whenever St. Cloud plays Omaha, it always sucks because the games are like 8-7 final and overtime. Like just these weird like 6-5, and it's like all the goals were in the third period, or just like I don't know why it's always like that. But if I had to predict something, I'd predict two very weird games because they just
Yeah.
always are. But then watch and they'll be like 1-0 or something. We'll see. But they're always strange. I don't know. North Dakota is at CC. Um, Obviously, they're going to look to keep on rolling. Minnesota Duluth playing a non-conference game. Actually, they're going to be playing Lindenwood. That might be kind of interesting, especially if you're Lindenwood coming off of that weird game where you have 1,000 shots and you lose. So, kind of curious. I feel like I didn't see that on their schedule originally to have Lindenwood play in there. That's kind of cool.
And I mentioned him earlier, but Keith Fisher, the coach of Lindenwood, is an Iron Range guy. In fact, when he was at Penn State, I used to joke that I would bring him a porchetta at some point because that's a big
Nice.
specialty on the Iron Range, the spice wrapped pork roast. And I actually had it all set to bring him one time when I was going to fly out there to cover the Gophers. Then of course COVID happened and we didn't go. So
Oh,
I wound up eating the porchetta. Sorry, Fish.
well, maybe he'll have one this weekend
There we
playing the
go.
Bulldogs. But that'll be kind of interesting. I always like those random non-conference games. And then Saturday only series, St. Thomas is at Minnesota State. And those two teams obviously going to be looking for conference points and just a win for NPI purposes as well. But kind of quite a few interesting games, like not huge blockbuster games necessarily, but really interesting, kind of just fun ones I'm going to be tuned into this weekend.
Good way to kind of ease back into the schedule after the break and World Juniors and everything else going on. And it's funny to see how teams have started to schedule, especially the Minnesotas and Wisconsins and Michigan States of the world, where you're going to lose players to World Juniors. It's interesting how they kind of schedule things kind of light in early January just to make sure guys get back, guys get healthy. And I mentioned it before, but Max Plant, get well. Want to see you in the second half. He's been such a fun, dynamic player that we hate to see him lost for a long time with that World Juniors injury.
for sure. So thanks so much for tuning into this episode. Next week should probably be normal back with Tony. Just all of us had kind of a crazy schedule, and I know YHH has had 1,000 events over the last few weeks. So we thought we'd just knock
Yes.
this one out of the park here, and next week will probably be normal. But again, big thanks to our sponsors, the USHL. And APX hockey as well. And once again, for myself, for Ryan, and for Jess, thanks for tuning in. And we will be back as normal, hopefully, next week.